Hey folks, so welcome to lovely Meridian Playground. It actually is pretty lovely. It's a little rainy today. I'm making this video today because I want to tell you about some more videos that I want to make. So far, I've made videos that will help people learn how to play Adventure Survival, but I wanted to make a series of videos laying out ways to run Adventure Survival, be the DM, to be the GM, because I think it can be a little tricky to navigate sometimes, because Adventure Survival is this game that has a foot in sort of rule-based RPGs in like the adult world, but also it kind of has its foot a little bit in the role-playing games that kids play on their own when they're young. You know, I'll be this, you be that. And so I think some of the choices when you're running the game can get a little complicated, or at least a little nuanced, or maybe a little trial and error. But I wanted to make a series of videos about things like when people are, creating their first character. We'll even talk a moment today about starter items. Things like creation of spells. And to tie it all in, the reason I'm at the park is because a lot of the game as we play today was built with just playing it in the park, playing at recess, playing it on the playground, and I feel like there's a real sense of fun that should be at the heart of playing Adventure Survival and making these decisions that you would have to make as a GM. So this series of videos is going to be for folks that want to know more about how to run a game of Adventure Survival. Maybe you're a kid that started playing the game and you want to run it for your friends, run it for your parents, or maybe you're an adult that has heard about this game and it seems like it makes sense, but there are a few things that maybe could use a little bit more explanation. I'm really excited to do these videos because I've put out a lot of resources for students playing the game, for kids playing Adventure Survival, but I've not always recorded as much of some of the thoughts that I've had around running the game. So I want to actually give you an example of what I would be talking about in future videos, because it always makes me a little irritated when I'm looking for information how to do something and all I get is sort of a video telling me about how there's another video that I can go get somewhere else to get that information. So a topic that we're going to be talking about today is starter items. That is one of the first things you might have to negotiate when you are starting out running the game. So starter items. Starter items are the one thing that characters begin with. This is based partially in something that I've noticed with kids, or really adults. It can take a little bit of effort to kind of get into the game. You have to set up this character, you get all these things, and you make all these choices, and that part can be really exciting, or sometimes that part can seem like a little bit too much of a barrier. So the idea of starting out with this is one thing kind of reduces some of the choices. It reduces some of the effort to get into the game, and also affords a certain amount of personalization as well. You might encounter negotiations around starter items simply because Adventure Survival isn't your average role-playing game. Like I said, it kind of still has a foot in the pretend games that younger kids will just kind of play naturally. And so there's some flexibility. It can be almost anything. There are some specific rules that guide choices, but there are some times when kids might ask for things and you're not sure how to make a call. Alright, the two big rules around starter item creation. One, if it can be used as a weapon, it also has to be reused as a tool. Adventure Survival started out in schools, and weapons don't belong in schools. A lot of the gameplay revolves around being able to solve a puzzle, solve a mystery, talk things out, figure out a problem, and I'm not going to say that maybe some fisticuffs might happen along the way, especially if you are particularly rude to a town guard. But having a weapon doesn't really solve the problem. So if it can be used as a weapon, it can also be, it has to be able to use a tool. So for instance, an axe, or say a hammer. Okay. Clearly things like swords, guns, no. Some places where you might encounter a little wiggle room. So for instance, someone might ask for a slingshot or a bow and arrow. I've always leaned towards saying most likely yes to these items, because they usually have some sort of limited amount of ammunition, and also they could be utilized, for instance, for hunting. One of the things I do sometimes talk to people about is if they have an item that's, you know, can be used as a tool, but also very thoroughly as a weapon, and it keeps being used as a weapon, that starter item might not last. I had one player who really wanted like a small knife, like a pocket knife, and I let him know that if, you know, it kept being used sort of more in the more violent manner, then it might not last as long, and it kept being poked at people or creatures. And unfortunately, one day, this character decided to try to stab this giant lizard right in the mouth. Was not successful. Lizard swallowed the knife, was gone. The second hard rule about starter item creation is that it can't be a wish from a million wishes. It can't be one thing that does a million things. So for instance, a pocket knife with, you know, a million attachments. And I think the reason for this is pretty obvious. It sort of breaks the game. You know, your starter item is supposed to be the thing that starts you out. It gets you started in the game. It helps you obtain other things. And, you know, one item that's so multi-purpose, can be used for almost anything, ultimately kind of ends up making the game a little boring. So, what I try to do is, I think a lot of times if a kid is bringing that kind of type of choice to me, they're trying to be really creative, and I don't want to somehow punish them for that. I also want to make sure the game stays challenging. So the way I might negotiate something like that and say, okay, hey, you can't have a million attachments, but say it can have 3 really weird attachments that don't usually come on pocket knives. Like, say you can have like a handsaw attachment, you know, a magical blow dryer that pops out of your little pocket knife, so you always, you know, style your hair, and fishing net, and, or, you know, whatever they might be able to come up with. But I think that a lot of times kids are, you know, if they come to you with something like that, they're trying to be creative, they're trying to be problem solvers, and that's perfect, that's great. But, you know, you want to make sure that the game stays challenging. So offering maybe some creative alternatives with a limitation or two can be a good way to move through that situation. Sometimes when kids are coming up with starter items, they might have a little bit of a hard time coming up with ideas. I always encourage kids to try to think of what, you know, what's this character's job? There's a little spot for jobs, and the way I describe it is, what does this character do all day? You know, are they an adventurer? Are they a cook? Are they a miner? Are they an architect? Are they, they don't really sit around and do anything? You know, maybe they just like to stay at home all day. I have gotten that answer. But I encourage them to say, okay, well, maybe make your starter item something that relates to your job. For instance, like if someone is a cook, maybe they want their starter item to be a set of, you know, pots and pans, or like a mess kit that you can take out on the road. Starter items can be magical as well. What I always try to remind kids is to make sure there's room for growth. So, for instance, maybe someone wants a starter item that it's a tin of candies, and when they eat one, they transform into, say, a magical bird. I wouldn't say no to this, but I might put some limitations on like how many times a day they can do this, or perhaps how long they can do it for. So perhaps I would say, okay, well, they can have a tin, and it can have, say, 3 candies in at a time, and you can turn into this magical bird for, say, 15 minutes. And if you really want to make it interesting, you can say, okay, well, if you eat the candies, like you take one, and then you can stay a long rest, one will regenerate. But if you eat all 3 in a day, at the end of the day, you have to roll a d12. And if you get a 12, or if you get, say, a 6 to a 12, or some parameter, then the candies do not regenerate for 1 week. So things like that can allow kids to have a lot of creativity, but also make sure that the starter items, are that. They're somewhere to start with and to grow from there. Alrighty, so I think that's about all I have for negotiating starter items today. I can definitely talk about it more if that's something that people are interested in. I hope that you have enjoyed it, and I hope that you check out future videos on how to successfully run an adventure survival game. Alright, see you soon.